Welcome, brothers and sisters. This is Brother Nesbitt. Hello to all you children of God out there. I want to try to keep this brief tonight, but it is going to be difficult because there are a lot of things to understand. All I can say to start is that I feel like Nephi, but instead of being weak in writing, I'm weak in podcasting. Anyway, but I do have the approval of the Holy Ghost. He told me that the things that I say are true and will benefit mankind. So if you have a problem, I suggest you take it up with him. So tonight we're going to talk about Brigham's letter to the Relief Society, Brigham and Joseph's letter to the Relief Society, that is very against polygamy. So this is a very important document proving that Brigham Young fought polygamy. So it might be strange, but I want to start kind of with a lesson a little bit about Joseph and his strong power of discernment. So if you recall, in the Pierce's book, Joseph Fought Polygamy, a book we all should read, there's a story in one of the first few chapters that is evidence, strong evidence for how hard Joseph fought polygamy. So there's a woman. I'm just going to paraphrase the story. I'm not going to worry about dates or names. If you question, then read their book. It is a well-written, well-documented book, and you'll find this story in there with citations and everything. As evidence that Joseph fought polygamy, they show that a woman moved into the city where the saints were living at the time, and she got married to a brother there, and Joseph found out that she had a wife, she had a husband in the state that she had left, and he was so against polygamy that he wouldn't allow that woman to remain in good standing as a polygamous wife, polyandrous, whatever the term is. They're always talking about those terms, but he wouldn't allow her to continue in good standing, and I can't remember how they resolved it, whether she was excommunicated or forced to divorce the husband, but that's just very strong. It's not really the polygamous underground of Nauvoo per se, but it is an example of Joseph fighting anything that could be construed as polygamous, right? And so that's a powerful story, and I just want to point out that that happened, that he was extremely intolerant, but this will be a testament to his power of discernment. And it's actually interesting that the Pierces also quote this part that I'm going to go over before we talk about the document. And they actually leave out this little bit, but I think it's because they just don't want to deal with the complexity of how the Lord works in mysterious ways, and how Joseph's discernment is so powerful. So I'm just going to go over this really quickly. So basically, just to set it up, in 1840, about the month of August, they say John C. Bennett moves in to Nauvoo, and he joins the church. And I believe at this time he's living with Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith opens his home to John C. Bennett, right? And so it says, Joseph says, soon after it was known that he had become a member of said church, a communication was received at Nauvoo from a person of respectable character and residing in the vicinity where Bennett had lived. This letter cautioned us against him, setting forth that he was a very mean man and had another wife. Now, I don't know why it says another wife. If Bennett had a wife when he moved to Nauvoo. I'm not sure why Joseph says another wife right there. But he has a wife and 2 or 3 children in McConnellsville, Morgan County, Ohio. But knowing that it is no uncommon thing for good men to be evil spoken against, the above letter was kept quiet, but held in reserve. So Joseph is just being wise, right? He's not just going to believe this person of respectable character, right? He thinks maybe Bennett's being lied about, and he knows. Joseph knows all too well how that is. So he just keeps this letter quiet, right? He just keeps it in case he ever needs to use it, right? But then you can tell in the very next paragraph that he strongly suspects that the respectable character is not lying, because when Bennett starts courting a woman in Nauvoo, so I guess maybe he didn't have a wife that he brought to Nauvoo. I'm not sure, but he starts courting a woman in Nauvoo, and because Joseph knows that this respectable character was not lying, and therefore Bennett was a bad person, Joseph puts the kibosh on that whole relationship by he tries to persuade him first, and then he threatens to expose him if he doesn't desist. So it's kind of like Joseph gets to have dirt on Bennett and kind of make him do what he needs. And that could speak to why Bennett becomes the mayor, and why Bennett becomes such an influential person in Nauvoo. Joseph perhaps wants to use him, kind of use him and then lose him, And so eventually Bennett starts telling women that Joseph told him it was okay to have sexual intercourse outside of marriage. And of course, that's wrong, and that is when Joseph decides he's going to pull this letter out, right? So I don't know exactly what Joseph was thinking. I don't pretend to, but we know that Bennett became very influential, and Joseph had this letter the whole time and would use it to threaten to expose Bennett if Bennett ever got a little bit too out of control. So that is the Times and Seasons article, or is it the Times and Seasons or the Wasp? I'm not sure, but it's a letter to the newspaper, printed in the Wasp it's a letter from Joseph Smith, June 23rd, 1842. So this is when he's exposing Bennett for the horrible person that he is, right? And it's an interesting letter. I would advise everyone to read it. I'll go over it more later. Some of my favorite things are the attestations at the end by Brigham Young, of course, Willard Richards, Heber C. Kimball, Wilford Woodruff, all these good men, John Taylor, that were fighting polygamy. George Albert Smith, George A. Smith. These names, obviously they come up as polygamists later, but you can see they were not part of Bennett's ring, and they were actually helping Joseph expose Bennett. We will just have to come back to this later, because we wanted to talk first. So this was June 23rd, 1842. And if we go back to March of that year, March 15th, you have the Masonic Lodge becoming official, right? The Nauvoo Masonic Lodge. Before that, it was just in dispensation, which meant it hadn't been made official by the Masonic authorities, right? So that's important to know, because George Miller, around a little before the lodge opens, he goes back to McConnellsville. Sorry, I say it wrong. McConnellsville, and kind of searches around for more dirt on Bennett. So that's in March 2nd, 1842. So in March 1840, a respectable character tells Joseph that Bennett's not a good man. Then, a year later, in that letter that Joseph wrote to the Wasp, we'll talk about this later, but a year later, in 1841, he sends Hiram and William Law to the area where Bennett had lived, and they learn more about him. Right, they're collecting a little more dirt on him, and then in March of 1842, so not quite a year later after that, he sends this George Miller. So I guess all I'm pointing out is that Joseph works hard to be able to control Bennett. He knows he's an unsavory character, right? So then you have the letter. This is in March 1842, right at the end of March. And there's been some women making claims about what Joseph has said. It's kind of coming out, right, that Bennett's doing this. Bennett is using Joseph's name in vain, as it were. And so this is when Brigham and Joseph get together and they write this letter to the Relief Society. And they write this beautiful sentence that just moves me. It says, "Can the Female Relief Society of Nauvoo be trusted with some important matters that ought actually to belong to them, to see to which men have been under the necessity of seeing to their chagrin and mortification, in order to prevent iniquitous characters from carrying their iniquity into effect, such as, for instance, a man who may be aspiring after power and authority, and yet without principle, regardless of God, man, or the devil, or the interest or welfare of men, or the virtue of innocence of women." I mean, that is so powerful. What a strong opening to this letter. They continue. Shall God, excuse me, I'm sorry, I was reading this part down here. You understand. I'm weak in writing, but the Spirit will manifest the truth of what I say unto you. So, continuing on. Shall the credulity, good faith, and steadfast feelings of our sisters for the cause of God or truth be imposed upon by believing such men, because they say they have authority from Joseph, or the first presidency, or any other presidency of the church, and thus with a lie in their mouth deceive and debauch the innocent under the assumption that they are authorized from these sources? May God forbid. That is so strong. They definitely don't want any woman thinking that they can do these things because Joseph approved of it. A knowledge of some such things having come to our ears, that our, meaning Joseph and Brigham's, we improve this, favorable opportunity, wherein so goodly number of you may be informed that no such authority has ever can, or ever will be given to any man. And if any man has been guilty of any such things, let him be treated with utter contempt, and let the curse of God fall on his head, and let him be turned out of society as unworthy of a place among men, and denounced as the blackest. Renounced is crossed out and it says denounced, as the blackest and most unprincipled wretch, and finally let him be damned. So if you're going to try to use Joseph's authority, if the authority were ever given to any man, you would treat them with contempt. They would get the curse of God on their head. They would be turned out of society as unworthy, no place among men. They'd be denounced as the blackest and most unprincipled wretch. And finally, they'd be damned. I mean, just hearing these two prophets of God use the D word, it just sends quivers down my spine. We've been informed that some unprincipled men, they're talking about Bennett and perhaps Chauncey Higby, whose names we will not mention at present. I'm not sure why they're not mentioning their names. Someone will have to explain that in the comments. Have been guilty of such crimes. We do not mention their names, not knowing, but what there may be some among you who are not sufficiently skilled in masonry as to keep a secret. Therefore, suffice it to say that there are those, and we therefore warn you and forewarn you in the name of the Lord to check and destroy any faith that any innocent person may have in any such character, for we don't want anybody to believe anything as coming from us contrary to the old established morals and virtues and scriptural laws regulating the habits and customs and conduct of society, unless it be by message delivered to you by our own mouth, by actual revelation and commandment. Our own mouth, Brigham and Joseph's. That is beautiful. The mouths that can tell you revelation and commandment. It's powerful stuff. And then they go on. Well, I wanted to comment really quickly. It's interesting that they're keeping it a secret, right? Because, as I said before, you have Bennett, and he comes into Nauvoo, and Joseph knows right off that he's a bad guy. And that's because he receives a letter from a reputable character, right? And he believes him. Well, he maybe doesn't believe him. He says that he keeps the letter a secret because what if it's a lie? You wouldn't want to destroy someone's reputation, right? So he's a good man. But then when Bennett starts dating someone, well, then he already knows that he is bad. And so he ignores what he said before, and he just goes ahead and calls him a bad man and says, if you don't stop dating this woman, I will expose you as the bad man that you are. And then he continues to live with Joseph and continues to thrive in the community, become the mayor, and he's doing very well. He's rising up in the ranks. He's doing well, even though Joseph knows he's not a very good man. But, that's Joseph looking at people's character, second chances and all that stuff. And then here, where he's talking about, not saying the names of the men guilty, I suppose if you were stupid, right, and you believed that Joseph was a polygamist, you might think that he has told hundreds of people or dozens of people, I don't know about hundreds, you might think that he's told dozens of people different things about polygamy, and he's told Brigham it's okay, and he's told Heber it's okay, and he's been doing it himself, and he's trying to say this in a way that he can retain what he's told people as valid without have kind of a clean cut when he tries to denounce Bennett. And so he's afraid that if he uses Bennett's name directly, then that might mess up some of the other stories he's told and the connections that he's made with people. Because you might think that if you were ignorant, but then when you see, a couple months later, that he's exposing Bennett for all the horrible things he's ever done, you can tell that this is just him using discernment, to keep things secret until you really need to expose them. And that's really just the forgiving nature of Joseph. So let's finish this Sorry, that's probably an obnoxious noise. So yes. So actual revelation commandment. And all persons pretending to be authorized. And all persons pretending to be authorized by us or having any permit or sanction from us are and will be liars and base impostors, and you are authorized on the very first intimation of the kind to denounce them as such, and shun them as the fiery flying serpents, whether they are prophets, seers, revelators, patriarchs, 12 apostles, elders, priests, mayors, generals, city council, alderman, marshal, police, lord mayor, or the devil, are alike culpable, and shall be damned for such evil practices. And if you yourselves adhere to anything of the kind, you shall also be damned. Also shall be damned. Oh, does this sound like a guy that hates polygamy? It's ridiculous. You know, in a YouTube channel called Thinker of Thoughts thought they were so clever when they took this letter and there's one little phrase that Emma forgot to say when she was reading it, and so the minutes, the person taking the minutes as Emma was reading the letter forgot to write it down, right? But omitted is this, don't ever do it unless it be by message delivered to you by our own mouth, by actual revelation and commandment. They tried to take that and say that that's like a caveat for polygamy, that if Brigham or Joseph tells you it was revelation, then you can go ahead and do it. Otherwise, you listen to the scriptures and what's acceptable in society. And I think that's just so ridiculous. You can tell here that anyone that does it will be damned, even if he says right here, a prophet, seer, or revelator, if they tell you, if they're the person telling you to do polygamy, they'll be damned. Do you think Joseph is willing to say to someone that he would be damned? I don't think so. Now I'm going to continue. Now, beloved sisters, do not believe for a moment that we wish to impose upon you. We actually do know that such things have existed in the church and are sorry that we are obliged to make mention of any such thing, and we want a stop put to them. So they know about polygamy and they want to stop it. Brigham and Joseph know about polygamy. They know that it's been around and they want to stop it. I just can't believe anyone thinks that Brigham or Joseph was practicing polygamy. We want you to do your part, and we will do ours, for we wish to keep the commandments of God in all things, as given directly from heaven to us, living by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord. May God add his blessing upon your head and lead you in all the paths of, and I'm continuing, virtue and piety and peace, that you may be an ornament unto those to whom you belong, and arise up and crown them with power. Now that's a beautiful doctrine right there. When Emma saw Joseph, she said, "My crown." No, I'm butchering it. She said something about him being her crown, because she was his ornament, and it was her job to crown him with power, and that's just such a beautiful testament to the role of women in the gospel. Anyway, that you may be an ornament unto those whom you belong, and arise up and crown them with power, and by so doing you shall be crowned with honor in heaven, and shall sit upon throne, judging them whom you are placed in authority over in the world, and shall be judged of God for all the responsibilities that are conferred upon you. See, There's a lot of debate nowadays about whether or not women have any authority. And I think here we're seeing that women have authority, or they will in heaven, over the people they're given responsibility to judge. At a more convenient and appropriate season, we will give you further information upon this subject. We are your humble servants in the bonds of the new and everlasting covenant. Now, I know what you polygamy believers are thinking. The new and everlasting covenant, isn't that polygamy? Well, that's ridiculous. We'll have to do another episode about how that's not polygamy at all. Let that epistle be had as a private matter in your society, and then we shall learn whether you are good Masons. And then, of course, Brigham writes, P.S. If the Lord be God, serve him. And if Baal, and then it probably says serve him, but we don't know. And that's very interesting. I also noticed that there were times when the word devil was capitalized and God was not. And that's just interesting. It's just a mistake, obviously. Anyway, so, yeah. That is an amazing letter from Brigham Young, the president of the 12, and Joseph Smith, PCJCL. And I don't know what all those things stand for. Joseph had so many titles. He was such a powerful and a man taking so many responsibilities. But so I think that's very interesting. This really has gone on long enough. But if you've come this far, you might as well finish. So the secrecy, what I'm pointing out here is that Joseph doesn't mention Bennett, but it's obvious from everything going on around this time and in the past and what he's talking about that Bennett is the focus of this intrigue, right? And then what I really want to convey is what a powerful judge of character, because just when the time was right, Joseph was able to use Bennett as kind of a grower of the community. He brought a lot of skills, a lot of charisma, a lot of credibility to Nauvoo, and Bennett helped Joseph with creating the habeas corpus law that helped get him out of so many of the wrongful persecutions against him. Bennett was very helpful and to the church, but the whole time Joseph knew he was bad, and it was only when Bennett started using Joseph's name to try and get these sexual meetings with women, trying to use Joseph's authority, right? That's where he had to draw the line. And I want to contrast that with, at the beginning, I told the story from the Pierce's book where the woman had a husband and that had to be put the kibosh on. Now that's mysterious to me, but I understand that God works in mysterious ways. God was going to use Bennett, flawed man though he was, to do things to help Joseph build up the kingdom. And this woman was not, right? So for her, zero polygamy could be tolerated, or zero infidelity. But for Bennett, it's kind of a, use them till you lose them type of thing. And this is when he needed to be lost. So yeah, it's just a few months later, Joseph denounces him, and we'll talk a little bit more about that just for fun. Brigham, of course, helped Joseph get rid of Bennett by helping collect affidavits and signing his own. So those will all be very interesting things to talk about in the future. But again, I was hoping this could be a lot shorter. But, I'm just going to talk by the Spirit, and I want you all to just listen. Really open your ears, open your minds. I understand that this is crazy. You didn't know that Brigham felt this way about polygamy before today, but you do now. He definitely was not a participant in anything that Bennett was doing, much less anything that Joseph was doing or that he was doing on his own. He was too busy helping Joseph fight polygamy. And we actually have both of them to thank for less polygamy in the world at that time. So pray, read your scriptures, say your prayers. This is what's going to help you understand the truth when you hear it. You need to be in tune with the Spirit. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.